Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it is June 9th, 2022, and today I'm going to try and respond to a question that I got in reference to more swale modifications video that I just published recently. And I'll get to the question in just a second, but I'm also walking around with my GoPro Hero 7 camera on a gimbal and walking around the work area and coop here in just a second, and so that you get an idea. Now, I use the term swale to mean not necessarily just what a permaculture swale is. So in permaculture, we talk about the base of the swales remaining perfectly level, and so we can control water, slow its absorption and all, and I'll get into that in just a couple of moments. But this swale, I'm also calling a swale because what it does is it's not, the base of it isn't completely level at all points. At the beginning of the swale, which we'll get close to again, but if you were to backtrack this video a little bit, you'd see that there's no water accumulation because the swale's going downhill in order to avoid the water getting next to the structure, the building and all. So swales I'm using the term swale to control and direct the flow of water on your property. Now, the question that I got was, how do you design swales on a new site? Do you check the infiltration rate, rainfall, etc., those sorts of things? So what we're going to do now is take a walk around one of these sediment collecting swales. So this is the driveway here, and it's got a crown, and it feeds into several swales up there, and if it overflows those, it makes its way into this sediment collecting swale here. So the base of this swale is actually more of a canal system. So it starts off at just a couple inches deep, where we first started on this one here, and then it's progressively getting deeper and deeper as we go around the front of the house and around the eastern garden plot. So this drains pond 2. As we come up here in just a second, you'll see a couple of lions here on the left-hand side, and that's draining in between those two lions, going through a spillway and draining into this system. There's also another swale that drains into this system. But we collect the sediment here so I can gather soil in this system. But now we're probably at about 3 foot deep. We started off at just a couple of inches, and we'll get down to about 5 feet deep, just beyond Optimus Maximus, the tractor down there. You can see the dog run is on our right-hand side. The hugelkultur terrace is on the left-hand side of the swale system here, or the canal system. You can see there's duckweed on the surface. The depth of the water is getting deeper and deeper. Here's another little spillway draining from the garden area and the dog run area, so it can make its way into here. So all of the sediment that's suspended in the water systems, I designed this system so as the water gets deeper and deeper, the sediment falls deeper in the columns of water, and mostly clear water is going to pass over the driveway, the access road here, which we're going to go by, and it gets pretty clear, even though there's so much earthworks going on up above, because we're allowing the sediment to settle, and the water gets pretty darn clear before it gets into the bioremediation canal systems. So that's water going across the spillway here and going into our bioremediation canal systems. And we'll take a better look at this system here in a couple of minutes. But this is block walls. There's 2 layers of the block walls of the canal systems. The upper block wall separates the lawn or the food forest areas from the canal system. There's another block wall which separates the marginal zones, which is part of the bioremediation, from the deeper zone that goes in there. And straight ahead of us right now is pond 3, and this canal system goes across, travels across the driveway, and goes into pond 4 underneath a culvert going between the 2 elephants there. So one of the things I'm going to show right now is P.A. Yeoman's scale of permanence. And that's this scale. And I've made a video about this in the past, so you can search my channel if I don't put a link to it in the description here. P.A. Yeoman scale of permanence really it's a scale of looking at how much energy it takes to affect a change. So in the lower left-hand side of the scale is soil, and at the upper right-hand side of the scale is climate. So it's very difficult to change the climate. And when someone asks me a question as general, and this is still part of the bioremediation system going into pond 4 here, and then this will go underground into pond 5 in just a couple of moments. So we'll follow this path down. But in the scale of permanence, we're looking at things that are very difficult to change at the top of the scale: the climate, the landform, the water, invisible structures, socioeconomic, whether you're in an urban area, a suburban area, or in an agricultural zone, whether you're in a commercial zone, whether you have community, whether you have homeowners associations, whether you have ordinances and zones that are going to affect you, the type of vegetation and wildlife that are in the area, the microclimates that are affected, as well as buildings and infrastructures, the access roads I should have mentioned before this point. And then we get into the zones of use. I've talked about, zones 0 through 5. How zone 0 is the home. Zone 1 is like the kitchen garden. So the more time that you spend in the zones, that'll be the lower zone numbers: 0, 1, 2, and 3. And zone 5 is the forever wild forest node. So it's really, and then soil is relatively easy to change. The aesthetics, the decorations you have on your property, those things are relatively easy to change as well. They're not nearly as permanent. Fences are relatively easy to change, although they may seem very daunting and difficult to affect change on ultimately. But so in order to answer the question, we really have to look at how well you know the property and what your goals are. So with us, we wanted to ultimately create a sanctuary for wildlife and for continuing education. Right now, I'm walking through an area in the first food forest, and this is a swale that dries up quickly after rain falls and all, and this conveys the water from pond 5 into pond 6. And this is also a sediment collecting, but it takes a longer period of time for sediment to collect in here as well. Now we're heading into zone 6. This is just south of the solar panels and the raspberry plants we just planted here. We showed the video on that, and the grasses we just planted here. Because our property is so much gravel and sand, and in this particular pond right here, there's so much sand right here that the water retention ability is very, very low. The percolation test, or the flow through the soil, is absolutely phenomenal. So, but even with this one that's always leaky, our goal is to patch it up in the future. And this has a spillway, which we just turned the camera here, and we're going to go down into pond 7. So it really depends on what your goals are and aspirations for your property. And all of these things: the climate, the hardiness zone, depending on what you want to grow and accomplish, whether you want to have livestock on the property, and how you design the swale systems is one of the things you think about in order to meet the functions of all of the other things that you have on your property. So now we're coming right up here on pond 7 in front of us here, and pond 7 is one of the ponds that we excavated out the year before last to expand it some. It isn't done with an expansion yet, but you get an idea of this. This is a small little peninsula here. It'll be a larger peninsula in the future, but you can see some of the rocks that were just caught in the side of the screen. And we have tons of boulders, but it's all gravel area. So one of our goals, in order to create food forests and an abundance of food, is to build beautiful soil. and the keyline scale of permanence, the soil is the easiest thing to change, even if you've got hard packed clay or you've got really bony gravel like we have. So when we designed our property, the reason that I designed a bioremediation system into our property is because we have the old town landfill right next door to our private road, Row Road. So that material is going to leach through all of this gravel. This is long before all of the regulations with having a clay liner or a plastic liner there. So all of this stuff gets into the water. So we wanted to break down any potential harmful elements and break them down into the inert and potential beneficial subunits ultimately. Now I'm going to head down this access road going down to where the beaver ponds are as well. So access roads can act as a water access path as well. So, with our driveway, you saw there's a nice crown to it, and we have the swales on either sides of the driveway area. With this area here, since I've been working on it so much, the tracks of my equipment had made some indentations, and you'll see the water makes it down there. The crown is no longer present, so I'll have to work on this access road component again in the future further. So you can actually see the places, hopefully it's showing up in the screen, where the water runs down in the tracks. And so it separates the lighter sand material and sediment material, and it deposits downhill. And that's one of the things that we want to do with designing in swales. We want to control surface runoff. We want to increase the stabilization of the growth, that's the vegetative growth that's on the surface of the soil. We want to build deeper, richer soil that's healthy, that's loaded with the appropriate microbial communities that will support. In a food forest, we want to have a mostly fungally dominated soil. In gardens, we want to have a mix between bacterially and fungally dominated soil. So all of those things make a big difference. So again, looking at, do you actually know, how well do you know the property that you already have or that you're purchasing? So like with me walking out here with the camera, it's so important at all different times of the year to come out and get a really good idea, to feel, to smell. So as I'm walking along the access road here, not only am I looking at and getting down at ground level view of where the water sits, where the low spots are, I'm feeling how my feet, how much they tend to become depressed in the soil. Looking at, what about the wildlife that's in the area as well, the type of vegetation that's here. I'll also examine what the microclimates are. So, when we go down those hills, the cool air is going to follow its way down. So we want to decide where we're going to put our gardens depending on the microclimates that are created by our water systems and by our access roads and the slope of the property as well, and fences as well. So when I'm designing swale systems or canal systems or pond systems, we want to meet our needs. Now, in one of the recent videos, you could see that pond 1, and we'll potentially go up there and visit that again. So right now I'm walking over a sandy area because this is where there's a lot of sand just underneath all that rich soil there, and I recently dug this out and all. So the sand is going to be pretty soft under my feet as I'm walking, just like on a wet beach and all. You'll feel it give some. And that will allow you to think about, well, what are the limitations of this soil? What can I do with this soil? And this is a narrow spillway here coming from the lower beaver pond. So this is a lower beaver pond. We'll be walking on the lower beaver dam in just a moment here. So this is a lower beaver dam that we're walking out on now. And we wanted to have forever wild zones in our zone 5. And we've recently purchased additional property to secure these features and to further develop these features. So here's a little beaver crossing right before us right now, those little trenches on each side. That's being worn down by the beaver going back and forth. And you see a raccoon, most likely a raccoon had dug out some of the turtle eggs. So that this is June. So the snapping turtles and painted turtles are all laying their eggs right now. They're all over the place. But you can see they've worn through a little path right there. So this is a lower beaver pond right here. And we're on the Lower Beaver Dam right now on this access road. And this road brings us, if we don't make a left up here, brings us over to the other property that brings us to the next road that we recently purchased. There's another beaver dam down before us now, down ahead of us. So that's another interesting site development that we'll be working on in the future. And so with each piece of property, if you're on it and you have the ability to go out and record the sounds, make notes about the temperatures, where the temperatures are in different pieces of the property. What is the percolation? How quickly does water drain into the soil? Swales can be designed to work really well even in desert environments or in flat environments. So in a desert area, I would plant my trees in the base of a swale to try and get as much water to the roots of those trees as possible so that they can dig deeper and deeper and deeper into the soil and develop a canopy over the swale. Whereas here, and this is one of the beaver dams right here that we're looking at. This was a part that I dug out last season. You can see the where I had put a spillway in here temporarily to work on the land as well. So I forgot what I was saying there for a second. Oh, Lord. So whenever I'm looking at the environment that I want to modify, I want to look at what ultimately my goal is 10, 20 years from now, and then I'll construct a 5-year plan. So this is a spillway area here that we're going across. It's wide and passive. And so one of the things that we want to do is not only control the direction of water so we can avoid it going into your basement or going into a building, or avoid it from going off your property. You want to keep that water on your property for as long as possible. So one of the goals of designing swales here in a non-arid environment is to design at least one row of trees on the downslope side. So again, and I forgot I had started with this, this is all the upper beaver pond here, and then we're on the upper beaver dam right now walking across. I haven't really worked down here. I dropped a boulder down here a few days ago, a small boulder. And but you'll see as we walk along that the beaver have been bringing up logs on top of the dam itself to build it further. So in our cold temperate climate, one of the goals of the mounds on both sides of our swales is to have trees. And those trees will gradually develop as time goes on and send the roots down. And hopefully we have some tap-rooted pioneering species that can help to penetrate and bring more water down into the soil. Over several year period of time, eventually the root systems will develop enough. There'll be enough of a charging beneath the soil surface to actually start to recharge the aquifer. That's a big component of our our pool and pond systems here and our canal systems. We're constantly trying to recharge our aquifer here because of the value of water. Water is life. Clean, fresh air is life. And healthy microbial communities in soil is life as well. So what we're trying to do is to cleanse the water, build microbial rich soil, and do things that are very healthy for our environment. One of the things I'll say is that when you're looking at your property and all, we're really blessed that they put an incinerator to the east of our property. Since our prevailing winds come out of the west, when that incinerator energy recovery system incinerating waste from people's trash, all of that stuff ends up going into the atmosphere, and those people to the east of us, because we have winds coming out of the west, they are getting that air pollution. So we have a landfill next to us. Some people have a source of air pollution. Some people have heavy zoning and strict requirements and requiring permits to do anything. And some things are completely off limits. So when I look at that key line scale of permanence, it isn't just about the climate and the soil and the topography and the hardscapes that are there and all. It's all about researching the property thoroughly and knowing what things that are inherent to the property that you're developing on, what your long-term goals are, and looking at what can potentially happen negatively or beneficially as an impact down the road. And certainly culturally and socially, there's a lot of forces that can be either in your favor or work against you on your property as well. And certainly making sure that the zoning is appropriate for the activities that you want to develop on your property. Whenever I'm looking at a piece of equipment, I choose the piece of equipment to meet the needs of the functions to accomplish the tasks that I hope to accomplish using that piece of equipment. So often people will buy their first tractor, for example, and it may be too big, or it may not have the attachment abilities to have the implements that they want to use. So it's always realizing what it is that they want to accomplish, figuring out what attachments are needed for the equipment, and then buying that ideal piece of equipment that can meet all of those needs. And it's the same thing when we're investing in a piece of property. And when you're doing your investigation, whether you already have the property or whether you're looking at a piece of property in a remote location, you want to take into consideration what are all of the factors on the property, because the ponds, the swales, and canals will have to meet the needs of your goals in the future and not violate any zoning ordinances or whatever, or laws that you're going to be held liable for. So, for example, we want to have a forever wild food forest here for the native wildlife. So we will be putting in more and more work into our Zone 5s, because we recognized years ago that we had the emerald ash boring insect, which has destroyed so many trees, which means it gives us the opportunity to reforest the area. Yes, it is a hassle, but it's something that we can do. So that's something to think about. So I know it's so hard for me to answer a question that has such a wide possibility of answers based on what one's goals are and the property design. Certainly, you want to know about how deep your water table is and the soil is. So if you've got really good clay soil on your property, then you can probably have lots of swales. The width of the swales is dependent upon the soil type that you have. So we have gravel, and so water tends to flow through the gravel much more easily on our property because we have so much gravel here. So our swales don't have to be as wide as in other places. But a swale is also a tree growing structure. And so as we grow trees on both sides of the swale system, and then we start with we develop pioneer species of trees initially, and we do ground cover to preserve the soil surface and prevent erosion. And then we're ultimately going to put in the harvestable, the fruit trees and nut trees and all of those secondarily after we've established good soil in the area. Now, up in the area that we'll be getting to in a couple of moments is the second and third food forest. But right now we're just heading back into the first food forest. So this is Pond 3 here, the backside of Pond 3. This is one of the areas that the canal system, the Bioremediation Canal system, leads into this pond. So far we've seen 2 beaver ponds in this video. We've seen the swale collecting, the sediment collecting canal system that feeds into the bioremediation system, and this is pond 3. And then I think we went around to pond 4 yet. I can't remember right now. And then we go to pond 5, 6, and 7, and we'll go up to ponds 1 and 2 in just a couple of moments. Now this pond, we had an island put into the center of it. And we also have these our swales, and our drainage swales will go into double-lined easements into the ponds as well. So the wildlife, everybody can come down in here and hunt in here and get easy access to water without getting hurt going into other areas as well. And so I still have a couple of ponds to put up in the upper right-hand corner up here in the future. And I've talked before about our vernal pools and how important they are, so I'm not showing those today as well. But we'll walk over here next to that pergola there, and we'll take a look at the bioremediation canal system here. I think we do that again here in just a second. So we go over by pond, this is pond 3 again that we're going up to. And we're going downhill right now, working towards this canal system. So the slope goes from the high part of the property at the northeastern part of the property, and the hill or the slope goes to the southwestern part of the property. So this is part of the other bioremediation canal system that we didn't get a look at. And then we go across in pond 4 and then pond 5. I can't remember which way I actually went here, but we'll get to that. So I've made a whole playlist of our ponds, swales, canals, our bioremediation systems to give you our flavor in our cold temperate climate here of what we've got. So to the left here, off screen, is the sediment collecting canal, and just at the edge where you see a little bit of looks like a hedgerow over there, that's where where these trees are planted on the left-hand side of the screen, is the hugelkultur terrace. So what we've done all along in this area and the areas that we're going up to now is we took down many dead trees and poison ivy and some stone walls, and we buried all of that material. So we sequestered all of that carbon. And I'm sorry, I see that it's raining now at this time. And so we sequestered that carbon, buried it under the ground, and our swale systems up here all recharge, keep that carbon source nice and moist. And that allows for a higher water volume to be able to go into these hugelkultur pits. And hugelkultur just means earth-covered woody material. And so most people will make hugel mounds, which are woody logs and branches and materials and all that they take dirt and put it on over the surface of, and they grow into it. And I've done that in the past, but I saw that was too much work for me, and I'm always trying to reduce the amount of work that I'm doing. So this is pond 2. And straight ahead of us is the upper northeast corner of the property. I'm sorry there's so many water droplets on the screen here. This is one of the swales that's above the house. And this swale at this end is about 6 or 7 feet deep. There's tree lines all along in here. This is the second food forest before us right now. And here's another swale here. This one deposits its water. It takes the water from the road and from the driveway, each one of these 3 swales, and then goes into pond 2. Now we're walking up a spillway. It's hard to see this now as I'm looking at the video as we're talking here. This is a spillway coming from a swale that's right here, and you'll see the mound is on the downhill side here, and you see the trees are all planted in the downhill side. And in the downhill side there's rows of hazelnuts, there's a couple rows of trees there, various berry bushes, shrub layers, herbaceous layers, root zones. There are some vine layers as well, but not too much. And now this is the other swale system that comes from midway down the driveway. This is another spillway that's coming from another swale system. And right there before us are grapevines. What we want is a nice slope. So I'm pointing now to the swale system. And now we're walking through a spillway here. I'm going to go through some cable for the grapevines here. And the grapevines, we have them going downhill so that the moisture, so that they aren't too wet. Now this is one of the swale systems. It has trees planted on both sides, and this swale at this depth here drains into the next swale down. So we have so far 3 swales in the second food force, and now we're heading in just a moment. So this is one depth of swale that I'm walking in right now. Now we're going to a higher area. So this water comes from runoff from the road, works its way through the chestnut trees, then the blue spruce, and then through some nut trees and some flowering trees here, as well as pioneer species as well. And this is the swale that I was working on. But if you notice, the further that we walk, we are actually walking uphill. So the base of the swale is staying level. So in a cold temperate climate here, we want the trees on both sides in this area so that we can penetrate down and expand the absorption of the water going into these huge hugelkultur pits that are all to the right of the screen over there. So the hugelkultur pits are all to the right of this swale, and although the ground level levels off right here where we're walking, it actually pitches down a little bit, but the base of the swale is pretty much level. I still have to dress it up some since excavating all of the material that we're walking on right now, which is the sediment that had been building up over the last couple of years. And now this swale stops, and it a little bit it goes over a spillway into pond 1. Now this pond is about 10 feet lower than about 100 feet away at 450 foot elevation. So this is about 440 foot of elevation, but we can actually go down the property, capture water downhill, and maintain a low level. And since the part before us just a moment ago was higher, so we can actually facilitate getting the proper, even though our property slopes from the northeast down to the southwest, we can actually bring water to the east so that we can get more uses of the same water on our property. So the spillway is at the opposite end of the screen away from us right now, and I still have some vernal pools and ponds to put into the woods there. I had taken out some big trees in this area, so I did a lot of excavation work here. I harvested all of the soil from the swales, and that's all the dirt covered areas right now. Now we're getting up close to where the garlic and the shallots are planted, right up ahead of us now. Again, I apologize for the drips on the screen. So we're actually walking downhill. The direction of this road here, that we're, or not road, but it's like a road right now. It's a working area. So there's gooseberries here. There's all the peach trees, persimmons, plums, apples, pecans. To the left of us are the walnuts. But as we're walking down this looks like a road right here that I've been working on, this is actually walking in the direction of the slope of the property right now. So we gather that water and we try to use that water as many times as possible on the property. We want to prevent erosion. We want to direct the water into the direction that will most beneficially serve us. We want to keep the water as high on the property as well, so that it potentially can be an energy source, or when power failure goes out, gravitational forces can give us the water to do irrigation. There's hazelnuts on either sides of us now. We're walking between a couple of different swale systems right now. 2 swale systems to our right, 2 swale systems to our left. and many rows of various fruit and nut trees on each side. We won't go to the other side of the driveway, but we'll walk down that way in just a second. So I hope this video is somewhat helpful as far as seeing, how I'm looking at things, and I have made videos on our zones and how they are. And if you go back and look at my video on the key line design, and that's a real scale of permanence and how easily some things are changed. So climate is not changed very easily. The landscape is not changed very easily. The water supply isn't. But then we get down to access roads. That's something we can modify a little bit. But once you've got your trees and your buildings in, you don't want to modify your access roads or change the design. The subdivision fences and all are not as easy, are real easy to change. And certainly the thing that most people think about that would be the hardest thing to change is the soil, and that's actually one of the easiest things to change. So we really want to think about access to water, how we're going to run the water on our property, how to get as many uses of the water as possible, how to avoid erosion, how to build soil with that water, how to clean the water if we have pollution sources, how to clean the air as well. And I've talked in the past about part of our bioremediation is the fungally dominated soils in some of these spillways. So when the leaves fall off and we have those what are PM 2.5s or polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons that are released from internal combustion engines, we want all of those components that are adhered to leaves to be broken down and turned into good building components for our soil. So I think what I'll do is I'll end this video here. I'll walk back to the house. Hopefully this is somewhat helpful. Please leave any comments or questions down below. I'd really appreciate some feedback. I know these are long-winded videos, but I wanted to at least attempt to answer this in a somewhat helpful way. Thanks so much for watching, folks, and have a super fantastic day. Bye-bye now.